So while this theory is interested primarily in self-disclosure and how self-disclosure happens within relationships, this theory also gives us a tool by how to gauge whether or not we will engage in self-disclosure. Um, and this is a really kind of interesting facet of this theory because it really relies on an economic metaphor here for determining how we do it. So remember we said that there's harm, right? There's danger by self-disclosing. You put part of yourself at risk when you do that. And so we don't just self-disclose to everyone, right? We pursue relationships. Some people we self-disclose to and we try to foster relationships, and other people we don't. How is it that we determine whether or not we will self-disclose to someone or not? Well, as we said, there's an economic metaphor here, and social penetration theory argues that we decide whether or not the perceived mutual benefits of a relationship outweigh the cost of vulnerability. Um, and so it's pretty easy to think about, right, like benefits and costs that go into a relationship, right? So the benefits of a relationship can be things like companionship, right? Perhaps financial, perhaps stability, right? Someone to do things with, right on Friday night. They can be sexual. Like relationships have all kind of benefits built into them. And depending on what your relationship is with someone, that's how you know what kind of benefits you're going to get. But relationships also have costs. There's costs that go into relationship. Relationships are not free, right? So time, money might go into relationships. Sometimes you don't get to do what you want to do, right? On a Friday night, you may not get to watch the movie you want to watch, for example. Right, like the same way that you have friends, so you can have someone to call when your tire goes flat at 2 a.m. You have to be willing to be called to go get your friends picked up when he or she has a flat tire at 2 a.m. Right? So what this theory argues we do is we weigh these costs and benefits to decide whether or not we're going to self-disclose. We predict an outcome before an interaction takes place. We think, what can I get out of this, right? We seek to maximize benefit and minimize cost. Um, the theory proposes this happens through what we call a comparison level. A comparison level gauges your relational satisfaction. It's the threshold for an outcome that appears attractive, right? So there's some sort of threshold where you say, okay, that makes it worth self-disclosing in this situation. Um, and when you reach that threshold, that's what we're going to call our CL here. Our CL gauges how happy you are in a relationship, basically. Are the mutual benefits outweighing the cost of that particular relationship? Now we even have this kind of language built into our everyday conversation, right? So, for example, sometimes you'll hear people say, "Oh, you just don't go for her. She's high maintenance," for example. Right? When someone is high maintenance, what that means is there's a high cost and a low benefit associated with being with a relationship with that person. Um, and so, or sometimes we talk about settling. It's time to settle, right? You're not going to get any better than what you have now. Right? And this is the kind of stuff that, like, we're talking about this in economic determinism kind of metaphor when we use that kind of language. But, right, if what we're interested in a relationship is, right, maximizing benefits and minimizing costs, so for example, if you are an investor, right, you're not only interested in how much money you're making, you're also interested in how much money you could be making, right? Um, and so we have what's called a CL alt, which is the best relational outcome available outside of your current relationship. This person that you're with, let's just assume a romantic relationship here, right, has costs and benefits, and this person may, I don't know, we'll just give it an arbitrary number, right? Maybe you're a 7, a level 7 out of 10 on your CL scale, right? Well, what if there's an 8 or a 9, right, somewhere else? And so you are always constantly evaluating the best possible outcomes outside of your current relationship as well. Um, and right, if you were thinking of leaving that person, for example, right, you have an 8 or a 9, well, there's a bunch of other things to take into account, right? Like, so breaking up isn't free, right? That would be a cost as well. Perhaps you have a history with someone, that would be a cost as well. Um, but current relationships fall into trouble when they fall below they fall below that relational stability threshold that we're talking about there. And so if a CL alt for an alternative partner is higher than your CL for the partner that you're currently with, your relationship is going to get rocky. Now, this theory is often used to explain why people stay in abusive relationships. So perhaps you're not very happy in the relationship that you're in, but the alternatives aren't that much better, right? So assume that you're a abused woman, right, and maybe you have kids, for example. Are you going to be able to find the financial security that you need outside of your current relationship? I mean, for some people, being with someone is better than being with no one. And so while your CL may be low, your CL alts may actually be lower in that situation. Now, optimal self-disclosure, right? Because remember, this theory is about about guessing when we're going to self-disclose to who. And optimal self-disclosure happens when both people in a relationship believe that the outcome of the current relationship, right, the CL, is greater than the CL alt, right, and that the CL alts are less than CL. So both parties have to reach that threshold of CL that we're talking about. And the existing relationships available have to be lower than the comparison level that they currently have. And so what that means is that both parties have to do it. That's the really important function here, right? So if one person in a relationship believes that the CL alts aren't better, but another one does, that relationship will still suffer from instability. So a couple questions here, right? And these are things that you might want to think about for your journal. Do you believe that this is how relationships actually work, right? Does this economic metaphor do a good job of explaining the way that relationships work? And if so, what about love, right? And we all have seen people be in relationships that are seemingly counterintuitive when we say, what is that person doing? But someone may be head over heels in love, for example. And what if they have lower, even if their CL alt is lower in that particular situation? And we're speaking about love, right? Like, is that a kind of way that we want to think about our relationships with other people, as if they're determined by this economic metaphor? So, right, so for a Valentine's Day card, would you write to your significant other, right, well, this relationship has a CL threshold of 7, and all existing CL alts are only level 5, so happy Valentine's Day, right? That's likely not a happy way to think about your relationship. Is it possible to be unselfish in a relationship? Also, another thing to think about, another question asked about this theory is, does self-disclosure necessarily mean relational closeness? It might not, right? We can think of examples where self-disclosure happens where maybe you don't feel close to someone. Maybe you don't want to hear what that person has to say. So this is an objective theory, so we put it through our objective criteria here. First of all, does it have a hypothesis that can be tested? Very clear hypothesis that can be tested, a cause-effect statement there about if these things happen, self-disclosure will likely be optimum. Does it have practical utility? I think that's something that you have to ask and answer for yourself based on those questions that we're talking about. Does this help us in our everyday relationships, to use this economic metaphor? Does it have an explanation of the data? It seems like it, and it seems intuitive, even if it's not something that we like to think about. I think you can think about relationships in this way, and it does match up with the data. Experiments on this do ring true. Help us predict future events is very high on that one, because once again, right, it says if these conditions are met, this is the kind of self-disclosure that will happen. Finally, is it relatively simple? I think it's incredibly relatively simple, because it boils down the complexity of human relationships. Remember, we said objective theories take complicated things and make them simpler, right? And what we're doing is we're taking all the complexities of human relationships and we're boiling it down to a kind of mathematical formula here. It doesn't get much simpler than putting things in these kind of economic terms. So anyway, I would recommend that you think about those questions that we ask for your journals, or that you highlight those on the discussion board. So, all right, good deal. See you all next time.